Of all of the aircraft on display here at the Stephen S. Udvar-Hazy Museum of the Smithsonian outside Washington, D.C., none is more remarkable than this one, the B-29-45-MO named Enola Gay. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay dropped the Little Man atomic weapon on Hiroshima, Japan. Depending on which statistics you believe, it may have killed as many as 140,000 Japanese. Now, this is a very different B-29 than the ones that were involved in the fire raids in, for instance, over Tokyo during World War II. So let's take a look at what makes this aircraft so unique besides its history. Now, as I mentioned, this B-29 was fairly heavily modified. One of the modifications that it had was a much longer 33-foot long bomb bay. This accommodated both types of nuclear weapons that were employed during World War II. The first one at Hiroshima, the second 5 days later at Nagasaki. But there were other modifications as well to this B-29. Now, first of all, the original B-29's engines were problematic. They had a habit of catching fire. So the fuel system on this B-29 was modified. These had fuel-injected engines. They also had higher performance propellers. And because the fuselage of the B-29 in this case is modified, you notice that all the gun turrets are missing. The aircraft had lower drag and therefore higher speed, which was important because the nuclear strike missions over Japan in World War II were flown without fighter escort. So even though there were other B-29 observation aircraft accompanying them to do surveys of bomb damage after the weapon was delivered, the aircraft was effectively defenseless while it was over the target. Now, this display has not been without controversy. In the early 2000s, the display was actually vandalized here in the Smithsonian. And since then, follow me, let's take a look at this. There were some anti-nuclear activists here at the Smithsonian who felt that the display didn't accurately represent the toll of the nuclear attacks on Japan. So the activists threw some red paint from this balcony onto the Enola Gay. Since then, the museum has had to erect these clear barriers so that people couldn't throw anything onto the aircraft or touch the aircraft, vandalize it in any way. Some people have argued that while this display is very interesting and certainly a historic display, it isn't very balanced. There was a period of time when the Enola Gay was displayed with photos of Hiroshima after the nuclear strike. Some of these photos included very disturbing images of victims of the nuclear strike. Those images are gone from this display now, so one could argue that there isn't a lot of balance to this display. It simply shows the aircraft. The docents here do a great job of telling a little bit of the history behind the aircraft, but there's no mention of the casualties, and there's very little discussion of what Hiroshima or Nagasaki looked like following the strikes. But whether or not this is a balanced display or not, the aircraft is incredible to see. This is an unusual modification of the B-29. There were only about 17 B-29s modified as nuclear strike aircraft. And clearly, the Enola Gay is the deadliest aircraft in the history of air warfare. One aircraft, one bomb, about 140,000 fatalities in the Hiroshima strike. So it's an awesome thing to stand in front of, and at the same time, somewhat chilling to see in person.